All right, so today we're diving into something pretty wild. The collapse of the Assad regime in Syria. And honestly, the speed at which it all happened is just mind-blowing.
Yeah, it really is. It makes you kind of rethink how these things usually go down.
Right, totally. Our main source for this deep dive is this audio report by a journalist named Faisal. And this guy, he paints a picture that's, I don't know, more like a political thriller than a news report.
Yeah.
Secret deals and like sudden power shifts and a whole lot of unanswered questions.
There's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, we're basically trying to put a puzzle together with like half the pieces missing.
And sometimes the missing pieces are the most important ones.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So where do we even start, I guess, with what we do know?
Yeah.
So Faisal says that like major cities across Syria fell in under 30 hours. That's insane. 30 hours? That's like less time than it takes me to binge watch a season of, well, anything.
It's an incredibly short timeline.
Yeah.
I mean, it really speaks to a total collapse, not just militarily, but also just like their legitimacy.
Yeah.
You know?
Right. And then there's this whole thing about alleged deals with Turkey and Russia. Like supposedly Assad stepped down and then fled to Moscow.
Right.
But why would Russia do that? I mean, they were allies for so long.
Well, you know, in international relations, sometimes it's not really about friendship.
Yeah.
It's about self-interest. So maybe Russia just decided that they had to cut their losses.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Protect their own interests and kind of abandon a sinking ship. You know?
Yeah. And get this, even Assad's own tribe, the Alawites, they always had his back. Like they were his fiercest defenders. But even they seem to have just disappeared.
Wow.
If your most loyal supporters aren't willing to fight for you, well, that says something.
It really does. It's almost like the most telling sign. When a regime's core supporters give up,
right,
it means they've lost faith completely in their leader's ability to protect them.
Yeah.
You know?
Makes you wonder if it was planned. Like if he had an exit strategy.
Yeah.
Or if he just panicked and ran.
Yeah. Faisal even mentions this detail about Assad like fleeing in his private jet.
Really?
Barely enough fuel to make it to Russia.
Wow. So was it carefully planned or was it a desperate escape? I mean,
it does make you think, right?
Yeah, it's like a glimpse into his head at that moment.
Did he realize that there was no coming back from this?
Yeah.
And that it was better to just get out?
Right. So with Assad gone, the big question is who's taking over.
Right.
And that's where things get really, really interesting. Because it looks like this group called Tahrir al-Sham is making a move.
Okay.
And they're led by this guy, Abu Muhammad Al-Jolani, who, let's just say, he's got a bit of a past.
Yeah, I mean, his past is certainly complex. It makes it pretty difficult to figure out what he's really up to.
Totally. It's like 1 minute he's fighting with Al-Qaeda in Iraq, then he forms this Nusra Front, which is like Al-Qaeda's branch in Syria.
Yeah.
And then he breaks away from them and rebrands as Tahrir al-Sham. It's a lot.
It's a lot to keep track of. I think it's important to look at the context of all of that.
Yeah.
You know, were these actual changes in ideology, or was he just adapting to the situation?
Right.
Trying to position himself, you know?
Well, Faisal says that Jolani's basically gone full PR makeover. Like he's trying to present himself as a moderate.
Interesting.
He even gave this speech at the Umayyad Mosque in Damascus, which is like a pretty big deal.
And that's like the heart of Syria.
Right.
Right.
Politically and religiously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty strategic move. I mean, he's clearly trying to project this image of authority.
Yeah.
Appealing to a wider audience, maybe even like on a global scale.
But is it all just an act? I mean, can someone with Jolani's background actually become a moderate leader?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And if he does, what does that mean for Syria?
Right.
I think to really understand what he's up to, we need to go deeper.
Okay.
Look past what he's saying and actually look at what he's doing.
All right, so let's do it. Let's peel back those layers and see what we find.
Get into it. Yeah, it's like peeling back the layers of an onion, you know?
Right.
You think you're getting closer to the truth, but then there's another layer and another, and it's just more questions. Yeah, exactly.
So let's peel back some of these layers with Tahrir al-Sham.
Okay.
Because Faisal mentions this connection to the United States, and it's kind of troubling. Like, there are these claims that they've been getting support from both the U.S. and Turkey for years.
Wow.
He even brings up this PBS documentary from way back in 2014.
Okay.
And it supposedly showed Nusra Front fighters,
right,
which was Tahrir al-Sham before the rebranding,
right, yeah,
using weapons supplied by the U.S.
That's interesting because it brings up the whole issue of, you know, covert operations.
Yeah.
Foreign policy.
Yeah, it gets murky.
It's really murky, and you have to wonder about the long-term consequences.
Yeah.
Because we've seen it before, haven't we?
Yeah.
Where you support one group and then it completely backfires.
It's like you lie down with dogs, you wake up with fleas.
Exactly. And in this case, those fleas could have some serious baggage.
Yeah, serious baggage.
Ideological baggage, you know.
Right, and how do you explain that to the public? Like, hey, we're sending weapons to this group that was affiliated with Al-Qaeda.
Yeah, that's a tough sell.
It's a PR nightmare.
It really is. I mean, it creates this perception problem, doesn't it?
Huge.
Especially when you consider that Tahrir al-Sham, even though they're trying to rebrand themselves, they're still Salafists.
Okay, so for those of us who aren't like experts in Middle Eastern politics, can you break that down for us?
Sure. So basically, Salafism is like this ultra-conservative interpretation of Islam.
Okay.
They want to go back to what they see as the purest practices from the early days of Islam.
Got it. So how does that play out when you're trying to run a country?
Well, that's where things get complicated because they have this very strict interpretation of Islamic law.
Okay.
And they're generally pretty socially conservative.
Right.
And they often want to establish an Islamic state and their views on individual liberties.
Yeah.
Well, let's just say they're not always in line with what we're used to in the West.
So maybe not the most progressive vision for Syria?
That's one of the big concerns. And it's something that Faisal really emphasizes in his report.
Okay.
He points out that Jolani is kind of playing both sides.
Right.
On one hand, he wants to appeal to the West by distancing himself from Al-Qaeda,
Yeah.
presenting this more moderate image.
Right.
But then at the same time, he's sticking to his Salafist ideology,
Right.
which could mean very limited freedom for people
Yeah.
and a government based on a very strict interpretation of Islamic law.
So he's walking a tightrope.
He's trying to convince the world that he's changed,
Right.
but he's also holding on to the very beliefs that got him to where he is now.
Yeah. And let's not forget about the people stuck in the middle of all this.
Oh, absolutely. The Syrian people have been through so much.
I mean, it's been hell for them over the past decade.
Yeah, a complete nightmare.
Faisal talks about millions of people who have been displaced.
Yeah.
Many of them have fled to Idlib, which is now controlled by Tahrir al-Sham.
Right. It's a humanitarian crisis on a massive scale.
It really is. I mean, these people have lost everything.
They've lost their homes, their families, their livelihoods, and now
They're basically at the mercy of this group.
with a really questionable past.
Yeah, and an uncertain future.
Exactly.
And Faisal does mention that Tahrir al-Sham has been helping in some of these displaced people,
Yeah.
providing aid and protection, but...
But are they doing it out of genuine concern?
Right. What's the angle?
Or is it just another way to gain power and control?
Right. It's hard to know their true intentions.
It's really difficult to say. I mean, it's possible that it's both, right?
Right.
Maybe they're trying to help, but also trying to establish themselves.
Yeah. Use it to their advantage.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so we've got this incredibly complicated situation.
Yeah, we do.
Assad's gone, Tahrir al-Sham is on the rise. The US and Turkey are playing their own games, and the Syrian people are just trying to survive.
Right.
But there's another piece of this puzzle that we haven't really talked about, and it's a big one.
Oh, yeah.
Is
Israel, exactly their role in all of this is often overlooked.
Yeah, Faisal only mentions them briefly in his report.
Right.
But it's definitely enough to make you curious.
Oh, sure.
He talks about Israel making moves in southern Syria,
Right.
taking advantage of the power vacuum to kind of expand their influence.
Right.
And they're calling it a buffer zone.
A buffer zone.
Yeah, but is that really all it is?
That's a good question because, you know, Israel has always been concerned about Iranian-backed forces in Syria.
Right.
They see them as a threat.
Right.
And so with Assad gone, and he was closely aligned with Iran,
Yeah.
this is an opportunity for Israel to push back against that influence
Okay.
and to secure their borders.
Right. But Israel also has a history of taking advantage of instability in the region
That's true.
to expand their territory. I mean, is this just another land grab?
Well, it's possible. I mean, their actions in the south could definitely be seen as a way to solidify their control over the Golan Heights,
Right.
which they took from Syria back in 1967, and maybe even gain more territory.
And let's not forget about Trump.
Right.
I mean, he's expected to win a second term in January,
Yeah.
and he's been incredibly supportive of Israel.
Very supportive.
Right.
He even recognized Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights in Jerusalem.
Right, which caused a lot of controversy.
It did. A lot of people were not happy about that.
So basically, Israel has a blank check to do whatever they want.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And they're probably going to keep pushing the boundaries.
So what does all of this mean for the Palestinians?
Right.
Faisal barely touches on that.
Yeah. It's a crucial question, though, isn't it?
It is.
It often gets lost in all the other complexities.
It does.
But the Palestinian issue has always been connected to what's happening in the Middle East.
Right.
And what's happening in Syria right now is going to have a huge impact on their situation.
I mean, we're talking about a major power shift.
Absolutely.
Assad's gone. Iran is losing influence. Israel is expanding their reach.
A whole new land.
Yeah. It's hard to imagine that the Palestinians won't be affected by all this.
Yeah, it's very likely that the collapse of the Assad regime and Israel's growing power could make things even harder for the Palestinians.
Yeah.
They already have very limited leverage in any kind of peace negotiations.
Right.
And this could make it even worse.
It feels like the whole Middle East is shifting.
It feels like a seismic shift, and we're going to be feeling the aftershocks for years to come.
And it's a reminder that what happens in one part of the world can affect everyone else.
Absolutely. It's all connected, you know?
Yeah, the Syrian conflict is like a microcosm of how global politics works.
It really is. And the consequences of all this are going to continue to unfold in ways that we can't even predict right now.
Yeah, it really is like a high-stakes chess game.
It is.
But the pieces are constantly changing and no one knows the rules.
Exactly. And the stakes are incredibly high.
Yeah, so trying to predict the next move is almost impossible.
Especially with Al-Jolani and Tahrir al-Sham.
Right, like we still don't really know what they're all about.
Yeah, they're a bit of a mystery.
Faisal mentions that Jolani gave this speech at the Umayyad Mosque.
Right.
And he was trying to present himself as this modern reformer.
Okay.
He even compared himself to MBS, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia.
Interesting comparison.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Like MBS is a controversial figure.
He is. Some people see him as a reformer and others see him as an authoritarian.
Right. So is Jolani trying to tap into that narrative?
Maybe he wants to be seen as a modernizer.
Yeah. Gain some legitimacy.
Both inside Syria and internationally.
Yeah, but at the same time, Faisal points out that Jolani made it very clear that he's going to rule according to Islamic law.
Right.
So it's like this weird mix of progressive talk and potentially very conservative policies.
He's trying to walk a fine line, isn't he?
Yeah, appeal to those who want stability and tradition,
Right.
but also reassure the rest of the world that he's not some kind of extremist.
It's a delicate balancing act for sure.
Makes you wonder if it's all just an act, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, can someone with Jolani's past really change that much?
Right, is this genuine or is it just a power grab?
Time will tell. I guess we need to watch what he does, not just what he says.
Actions speak louder than words.
Exactly. We need to look at his policies, the structures he puts in place.
Yeah, and while we're waiting to see what happens, we can't forget about the Syrian people.
Of course not.
I mean, they're the ones caught in the middle of all this.
They've been through so much.
Millions displaced, the country's in ruins.
It's heartbreaking.
Their future is completely uncertain.
We can't lose sight of the human costs of this conflict.
Yeah, Faisal's report gives us a glimpse into their lives.
Yeah, their struggles, their resilience, their hopes for a better future.
But it also shows us how difficult it's going to be.
Yeah, the road to peace and stability in Syria is going to be long and hard.
And it's a reminder that peace isn't just about the absence of war.
Right, it's about justice, equality, opportunity for everyone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And achieving that in Syria is going to take a huge effort.
From everyone involved.
So where do we go from here?
That's the big question, isn't it?
What can we do? I mean, it's easy to feel overwhelmed by all of this.
It's a natural response, but we can't just tune it out.
Right.
We have to stay informed, engage in conversations, support humanitarian organizations.
And advocate for policies that promote peace and human rights.
Exactly.
It's about realizing that even though we're not physically there,
Yeah,
our actions, our choices, our voices can still make a difference.
absolutely. And most importantly, we can't become numb to the suffering.
Right.
Empathy is powerful.
Well said. I think that's a perfect place to end this deep dive.
It is.
Thanks for joining me today. It's been a whirlwind of information.
It has.
But hopefully we've managed to shed some light on this incredibly complex situation.
I think so. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Likewise, and remember, this story isn't over.
Yeah.
We need to keep paying attention, keep asking questions.
Keep the conversation going.
Until next time.